problem.
Right, where we go.
So welcome again to the Train the Trainer podcast, in which I try to bridge the gap between science and practice. And actually, this is called, Dave calls this
Academic.
a beautiful term. And today I have the honor speaking with Dave Collins, and now I have a biography. But I start with the last part of the biography because I found it so interesting. Dave is already a long time on planet Earth, and he has coached to national level in 3 sports. One of them is rugby, I'm for sure, but the other 2 sports we'll assume. He's the 5th dan of karate, director of the Rugby Coaches Association, and associate fellow of the BPS, an experienced PE teacher. That's his physical education educator, and for our audience, an ex-Royal Marine. And Dave has published over 350 peer-reviewed publications in 60 book chapters. That's impressive.
It's got worse, Eric. It's now 450 and 90. So
it sounds like a full-time job.
Well, I've got some. Well, I don't know. I got 3, I think, but I've got some targets before I leave. Before I leave the building, got a few things I want to achieve.
Yeah, but your list is incredible, and I can go on. And you worked as a psychologist, as a performance psychologist, or what kind of psychologist, by the way?
I would call myself a performance psychologist because, Eric, I work across sport, business, music, dance, military. So for me, the focus is performance. And to be honest with you, I think that performance psychology is probably where the profession's going to go. It's at the minute in the UK, it's called Sport and Exercise. I published a paper saying strange bedfellows, because the way sports psychology works, it should probably be tied into coaching psychology, business coaching, and exercise should be tied in with health, because again, makes sense. But I think there are all sorts of political pressures that prevent that. But performance psychology is, for me, what we do. And performance psychology will clearly take in elements of mental well-being. It'll take in elements of coaching. It'll take in elements of your field, your original field, organizational psychology. So it's quite, and of course, skill acquisition and motor control. So it's quite, there's a broad church of expertise needed to be able to do the job properly. So if I'm working with first responder trainers in any field, I'm going to need to know how they handle pressure. I'm going to need to know how they best learn skills. I'm going to need to know what happens to their execution of those skills when they're under pressure or when they're not. And I'm going to need to look at the sort of the organizational training structure and what that does. They all contribute to the sort of the knowledge base you need.
And I think in the Netherlands right now, there is a little shift. I think Nico van Iperen, he's a professor of sport psychology.
Yes.
And I think there is a little shift. There is a little more interest in not only the sport, but also in the performance, the broader. Do you think sport psychology is moving that way as a?
Well, I think it is for a number of reasons. I think it's a very sensible reason, because performance is performance. That there are. I mean, when you start, sport is a broad church, but if you start looking at things like gymnastics and figure skating, they're getting very close to dance. So there's that. There's a commercial pressure. There's not so much money in performance sport unless you work in football. So therefore, people start moonlighting, doing other stuff as well. So there's a variety of different reasons. It just strikes me, Eric, that what we are talking about is performance, human performance. My chair I'm a chair at Edinburgh University, and my chair in human performance science, because that's what it is. And that will encompass the skill acquisition, the motor control, the coaching, as well as what most people would see as the more traditional sports psychology.
Do you think, this is totally off topic right from the start, but I like it.
That's okay. I'm Michael.
No, it's. But do you think that sport psychology translates 100% to other performance domains? It's a stupid question.
No, it's a very pertinent question. On my gravestone, for those people who have the misfortune to see me on social media, they will see "it depends" is something that I push quite strongly.
Yeah.
I think it'll be written on my gravestone. I know lots of people will come to water the grave, but hopefully not too naturally. Anyway, it depends. And the answer to your question is it depends. There are lots of techniques that are pan-domain. They'll work here and here and here and here. Indeed, there are lots of things that work pan-theory. So they work in this theory, this theory, this theory. So you can take the techniques, but what you need to do is to be quite critical and careful about the field you're working in. But perhaps more importantly, the person you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
So context is king. And so what psychologists call the case conceptualization. How am I going to work with this guy? Yeah. What is it that she or he needs? What are the underlying issues that she or he might have or they might have? Now I put together a plan and that's how I work.
Yeah.
And that case conceptualization is done at least twice, to my mind. It's done when you meet the person and you decide on what method you'll use with them. Yeah. But you then go into a situation where you go, okay, I've decided on my method. Now I can do the evaluation. Now I can start to put together a plan that makes this work.
How important is this co-creation part? Because I know, if I'm correct, you also did work with Christian Gittebol from Norwegian on his dissertation, isn't it?
Yes.
And it seems to me that there was a large part important part was also the co-creation with the sniper trainers and so on.
I mean, when you look, even if you're, I mean, for example, I was a reasonable rugby player, but I had the honour to work with England, and that was an advantage and a disadvantage, because the advantage was I knew what they were talking about, but the disadvantage was I'd been playing against these guys 2 years before, and as far as they were concerned, I was a good club player, and they were international. What can this fool tell me? Yeah. So all of a sudden, whoever I work with, and I've worked across the board from martial arts, rugby, and weightlifting through to ballet, modern dance, at which I'm not very good. But it doesn't matter where I'm working; it's what they feel and what they think that I have to work with. Yeah, that's how it has to work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, great. One last question about this. Do you think that organizational psychology has found a good place in performance psychology? Because in organizational psychology, which I studied, there are also a lot of, like insights in how teams work, how organizations work. Sometimes I think that those insights are not fully incorporated in performance psychology, but I'm not sure.
Okay, I think that the different disciplines of psychology, not forget the theoretical positions, we'll talk about theoretical positions, I'm sure, in a minute, but the different disciplines of psychology are psychology applied to different contexts.
Yeah.
There are clearly a set of principles that apply, because we're always talking about humans. Yeah. If we're talking about rugby front row, we might be subhuman, but we're still talking about humans. We're going across the piece and we're going, okay, here are a set of principles. And I apply them to consideration of the organization, the individual, yada, yada, yada. So, it's important that we can draw on these different emphases or contexts of psychology when we do something. Yeah. So, I mean, your work now is, as I understand, is military and law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Will you draw on sports psychology? Indubitably. Will it transfer easily? Not always. It depends. So all you need to do is to take an idea and say, okay, let me deconstruct that idea. Let me understand how that idea works. I'm very big on mechanisms. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so hang on a minute. How's that work? Okay. Well, then that means it would work over here. Or, not sure that would work over here. So the explanations provided are key, because they underpin why I'm going to work the way I'm going to work.
Yeah, great. So let's move on to it depends coding. let's give some context. Maybe that's nice. Some 15 years ago, I was introduced in the Netherlands to what was called the play-centered approach in judo and later on in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Then after that, there was a movement called teaching games for understanding and game sense, which was moving a little bit away from technical to more, like tactical and so on. And then eventually the ecological dynamic approach and Constraint came to the scene. I liked it because there were some good elements, but today it seems like ecological dynamics is the only and best way. And you wrote some you wrote some great papers about it. The first was I liked very much a pragmatic approach to skill acquisition for physical education, considering cognitive and ecological dynamic perspectives. And you wrote a paper called "It's difficult to understand the universe if you only study one planet," a response to Mayaska, yeah, and David's. So it was a little bit, how do you call it, constructive feedback on ecological dynamics. But what has happened and why is it? Let's call it like, is ecological dynamics the best approach?
There isn't one. There can't be one. There isn't the best approach. There isn't the best approach till someone shows that something works everywhere. Yeah, I think there's a famous quote, isn't it? Everything works somewhere. Yeah, but nothing works everywhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in my youth, I was a keen physicist. If I hadn't joined the military, I was going to read astrophysics, and everybody looks at physics and goes, "Well, that's a very clear, objective science." And I mean, even physics recognizes there are at least two theories going on. There's a theory of the very small and very early, and the very theory of the very big and the whatever. And until someone does a grand unification theory, we recognize that there are these different answers. Light as a wave, or light as a series, is light a wave or is light a series of particles? Yeah. Interestingly, the work that contradicted those two was done by a father and son. They both won the Nobel Prize for it. So, we don't know enough to know it's definite.
No.
Now, people have accused me of being an eco-D basher. And I'm not at all. There are some elements of it that make incredibly good sense. They are the most parsimonious, the best answers. So of course you go, yeah, like direct perception. The idea that your brain, as a punch is coming towards you, that your brain is computing. Is it there? No. It's moving at a path of 12 meters per second. And it's just nonsense. Of course it doesn't. So this idea of direct perception is brilliant. Of course it works. Of course it works. And it comes from a very good principle that you see in young babies and crabs called looming, that if something comes towards you, you go, "Oh, bloody hell," it's a natural reaction, very early babies do it. So there's a lot of good sense in there. What frustrates me with any theory is when someone says this is the answer, because they haven't done the work to show that it's the answer. So our suggestion in a paper called "It Depends," strangely, and indeed a book which hopefully will be out next year by Human Kinetics. I'll plug that. It Depends Coaching, but whether they call it that or not, but never mind, that'll be what it'll be. But what you're looking at there is that there are at least three big theories. There's the cognitive idea, there's the eco-D idea, there's a modern thing called active inference or predictive processing.
Can you unpack those three theories for those who are not so?
Oh gosh, yes. Okay, so all right. So let's take an example. So the interesting thing as well is that the theories seem to move closer together as time goes on. They did this and now they're doing this again, and you're going, okay. And that's because one theory doesn't explain everything, so they have to, and they might use different terms anyway. But don't start me. So cognitively, I would look at a situation. I would compare elements of that situation to an internal representation, something in my head that says, I've been here before. And when I was here before fighting Eric, when Eric did that, he was probably going to throw a front kick. So, okay, I think it's going to be a front kick. And I've interpreted the situation by the use of an internal representation of my head. EcoD says, I think, quite rightly, in lots of contexts, you can't do that. It doesn't work quick enough. And anyway, how do you get the representation? So what you have is a thing called perception action coupling. So as the thing unfolds, my perception induces an almost automatic action. So perception is coupled to action. The two are intertwined anyway, so that my action then changes my perception, and now I can dodge. In very, very, very simple terms, predictive processing says, okay, so I'm going to fight Eric. I know he's got good legs. I don't fancy you, you're right, but I know he's got good legs, and he's going to throw a front kick. Okay, so I will attune my perception to watch for a front kick. Yeah, because that's what I'm expecting from him.
Yeah.
Now, if all of a sudden he shows me a front kick, I've already lined up that if he's going to show me a front kick, I'm going to work like this. I'm going to take the angle and do this. If all of a sudden he switches into a roundhouse, yeah, then that's a surprise. That's not what I was expecting. And my reaction will be somewhat slower because all of a sudden what I expected and what I tuned my perception system to look for isn't happening. So those are the major differences between the three. And of the three, the last one can be seen, the predictive processing can be seen as almost perhaps some sort of bridge between these two ideas. Yeah. And I like that. I go, oh, okay, so in certain circumstances, this would happen. In certain circumstances, this would happen. And that makes sense to me. It makes sense to me as a scientist. It makes sense to me. My doctorate was in EEG, neuroscience. It makes sense to me there. And it makes sense to me as a practitioner. Now, I think one of the reasons why EcoD has caught on so quickly, or perhaps overly universally, if that makes sense, is twofold. One, because it says things that people like. So it's attractive. I think some people, it's sticky.
What can you give example?
Okay, so the constraint sled approach. Yeah, the idea that you constrain this, constrain to afford. You put someone in this circumstance, you limit their movements, and then they'll learn more quickly. Yeah, and that's tied in with implicit learning. You don't give people the principle. And lots of people go, you know what, that makes sense. Yeah. So I like that. Whereas a lot of people would go, well, no, you want to actually teach, you want to instruct some detail. So that would be one reason why the ecological dynamics approach is called on. The other one is that people are very evangelical about it. You know, people are very, very dyed in the wool. This is the way. You mentioned our paper, the criticism of Maska, or again, if I'm mispronouncing his name, I'm sorry, but the idea that Bruce Lee was doing EcoD, you know, and they even have the bloody cheek to tweak one of his. I mean, there's a famous one of his many famous sayings. I do not fear the man who's practiced 1,000 kicks, but the man who's practiced one kick 1,000 times. Yeah. Now, one of the another underpinning of ecological dynamics approach and CLA is repetition without repetition. So they're going, well, you don't repeat. And if you've read our paper, Eric, you'll know that we say, well, repetition is a big part of martial training. It's been a big part of martial training since Ugg the caveman practiced how to use his club. You know, I'm ex-military. We practiced and practiced stoppage drills. You know, I jumped out of airplanes. We practiced and practiced how you throw a reserve. Yeah. You and I are from a martial arts background where you do hundreds of this and hundreds of this and da. So repetition equips your ability to vary.
But what do CLA people say about? I'm sorry to call it people. That's not good. What does the CLA approach from your perspective? Yeah? What are they for? If I understand it correctly. Are they against repetitions? I'm not sure.
Right. If I understand correctly, and I think what you need to do, Eric, is to get someone who presents that and ask them. But from my understanding, repetition without repetition is an underpinning. Yeah. And the underpinning is because no movement is ever repeated the same.
Yeah.
And of course, Eric and Dave are different sizes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And therefore Dave will do things in different ways, etc., etc. Now I agree with that.
Yeah.
But they also then say, so therefore there's no point, there's no technical model. Well, of course there's the technical model. There's a technical model which is built on the laws of physics.
Yeah.
And as they say on Star Trek, you cannot change the laws of physics. That's how it goes. So if I was to take a power clean, lifting the bar from the floor to here, yeah, mechanically, the path of the bar that is the most efficient is straight up. Because now I'm using all my energy to pull the bar in a straight line where I want it to go. Any movement that way and this way is dysfunctional.
Yeah.
But the way we're constructed, there will always be some movement this way and that way. You can't avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a technical model that says, let's make it straight line. Then there's a real model that says, okay, it's probably going to be a sort of a bit of a flat S shape. It's going to go out at the bottom, or it's going to go in at the bottom, out there, bang. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now you can vary it. So all the methods, the techniques that are used, I would use constraint sled. I would teach people to squat against the wall so that they maintain a position. But then the difference is I'd say, now, what did you do and why was that useful? So I'd try and promote their understanding, having used that method. But constraint-led approach has been around for years. At a time when England were reasonable at football, we're talking just before the European Championships, hopefully we do all right. But Germans and Dutch as well, anyway, whatever. But at a time when English football was quite big, there was a guy called Walter Winterbottom, and he was, I think, the first national coach of football. He wrote a book in the late 40s about conditioned games. And then there's a guy called Jim Greenwood, whose son was a fantastic centre for England. And Jim Greenwood wrote what, into my mind, is one of the best books ever on sport, Total Rugby. And again, there's conditioned games. They're just constraints. You know, it's a different label. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot about that. It's a long answer, sorry. There's a lot about that method that's good. There's a lot that it brings to the party. What I'm suggesting is, and this is, I fundamentally believe this, for coaches, for psychologists, for teachers, for most people interacting in human settings, there's a need for people to think about, now, what would I use? Why would I use it? What are the pros and cons? We call it professional judgment and decision-making, PJDM. Yeah. It's a posh version of it depends.
Yeah.
But whenever I'm faced with a challenge, if I'm coaching a group, if I'm coaching Eric, for kickboxing, then I look at Eric and I say, what's he good at? Where's he weaker? Okay, I will coach him towards this sort of model. Yeah. And now, how does he learn? How does he like to learn? How does he like to practice? I'll coach him in this way. And that's it. It depends. In a nutshell, you look. It's not a-theoretical. In other words, it's not non-theoretical. It's very theoretical. But it's understanding the theory as to what are the pros and cons of that method. Because whilst there is nothing so practical as a good theory, which I find a little hard to understand, there is a strength and a weakness. So what I want to do is exploit the strengths and counter the weaknesses. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No. It's a great answer.
Most of your viewers have dropped off by now.
No. They like it. But I would love to hear about the pillars of the depends coaching also. But I also have some questions where I'm struggling with the ecological dynamic approach. Maybe we can touch short on this, and maybe you also don't have the answer. But what I learned in first responder training is that the automatization of some skills, like drawing your weapon and do it 1,000 times and so on. The idea was that to free up your working memory and to have some, you can do it like automatically. So you rely in a certain way on long-term memory, maybe. I'm not sure where it's stored, but it's stored somewhere, maybe. I'm not sure how, but I could not find the answer in ecological dynamics, because where is the automatization part, or is there no?
No. And you, I mean, again, you've read our response to Being Water, the Bruce Lee paper, because they say that Bruce Lee, they rightly say that Bruce Lee said, well, you sample different approaches. You know, you train in different schools and you take what you want. But what they don't recognize or seem to sort of gloss over is the fact that Bruce Lee had a classic training, and his classic training will have involved lots of kata or forms.
Yeah.
It will have involved lots of work on the wooden man, drilling blocks and this, that, and the other. So he built a vocabulary. He built a basic set of movements for me that he then could use to create. Yeah. So his creativity stemmed from that basic training. Now, I agree with you. I point, and indeed we point in that paper to all sorts of circumstances where repetition is key.
Yeah.
Where repetition, as you described it, automates a movement, because it's repetition with repetition. You need to repeat. Yeah. That's part of the idea. Now, there are problems with it. There's some very interesting work, actually, I think done by Dutch, on if you do repetition kicks, the action degrades, if you know what I mean. It doesn't stay pure. So if you're going to do repetitious training, you need to make sure that there's someone is ensuring the quality of those repetitions, because practice makes permanent.
Yeah.
If you practice it wrong, you'll become very good at doing it wrong. However, there is repetition. Yeah. I'm right with you. I don't understand that. And I look forward to someone explaining to me without inventing a lot of new words.
Yeah, that's also translation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so if I'm distilling all this, it seems to me like that the actual difference in practice seems to me, and I'm not against constraint-led approach. I mean, I like some elements and so on, but the difference in practice seems to me that you use a lot of context. Well, you use because I remember that when I started Kyokushin karate training, there were some silos. You know, we did the Kihon, and then we did some standardized kumite, and then we moved to sparring. But as a young man, I always had the feeling, how can I apply the Kihon to the kumite? And so I think if you use context more in the beginning, or the teaching games approach, and maybe the difference in actual practice seems to me that it's more like a implicit guided discovery method.
See, I mean, one often quoted example is Colin McGregor training for a fight. He's going to fight a high level. I don't know the names. He's going to fight a high level guy, and he's spotted that this guy has a weakness. That when he throws this sort of kick, he's going to be open to this sort of punch. So McGregor practices it for 6 months. He's in the gym. He's got people with pads, and he's going right, dum dum. So he's now automated the idea that when this guy throws this kick, he's there, right?
Yeah.
You can even see him in the dressing room before the fight, practicing that same movement. He has clearly got a big internal program that says, if I see this, he's having this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but probably with an Irish accent.
Yeah.
So then he does, and he puts him down. Yeah. Now, that's repetition in a positive sense. Yeah. That's, go back to that predictive processing idea. That's, I think he's going to throw this, and when he throws this, I've already got my counter lined up. Yeah. Yeah. And I've practiced it and practiced it and practiced it. Yeah. Now, if, of course, the bloke on the other side goes, he's going to expect me to do this, I'll do something different, then fair enough, he's in deep doo-doo. However, that's a lot of what we do. You know, you will see boxers drill and drill and drill certain combinations. Yeah. And those combinations, especially when you get up the way, those combinations will have been put together to counter a particular boxer. Yeah. So if someone's fighting Tyson Fury, they go, Tyson fights like this. I need these sorts of combinations. I'll practice those combinations. So it seems to me it's very sensible. Yeah. It might occur though at different stages of learning. For example, if you go into a karate class and you start, it's very likely that for reasons of safety, but also for reasons of progress, the teaching, the coaching might be quite explicit. Do it like this, do it like this, do it like this. Then you go through a middle phase where it's, have a play with this, try this, try this, try this. And then you get to a top level when you're going, okay, I need to move on. But by then, lots of these moves have been automated, which means you can be quite creative. So maybe again, something we suggest in It Depends, some of the stage of learning or the context of learning means. Yeah. So I wouldn't use discovery learning if I'm teaching people to abseil, rappel, because they die and I have loads of paperwork to do. I go, no, you do it like this, you do it like this, you do this. If I'm very, very directive in a dance class, not that I've ever taken a dance class, but I've been taught a few, then it's counterproductive because someone's telling me what to do. They're squashing my creativity. So
again, it depends
on the nosy.
Yeah.
And for me, that's not a cop-out, Eric. No. It's not me ignoring the difficulties. It's me confronting the difficulties.
Yeah, great. So and then your paper, It Depends coaching. So if you are a physical education teacher or you're a law enforcement teacher, what is It Depends code? What is It Depends coaching, and what are the pillars of, or maybe the philosophy of this approach? Can you?
The philosophy of this approach is that there are different answers for different contexts. That varies for the age and stage of the learner, the aims of the objectives of what you're doing, etc., etc. Perhaps an example. I developed with one of my colleagues, a fellow called Lowell Collins, but an absolute first-rate outdoor pursuits instructor, kayaker. And we worked with the British Outward Bound schools. And Outward Bound is a number of instructors there. They're teaching a range of different outdoor skills to young people, children, young people, with the idea of development through the outdoors. So we came up with what we called the Big Five. It's a different Big Five to other many worked in. So we would say, right, when you're going to do a teacher course, when you're going to teach something, and then you review it like this. Give me 3 alternatives that you considered using. Tell me what would have changed that would have made you use one of those alternatives, and tell me when and how you will measure that was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I just taught, okay, let's keep it in martial arts. I've just taught a roundhouse kick.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it's important that, syllabus says it, but it's important that people get that sort of tool. How did you teach it? Well, I actually taught it by getting people to work into a pad. Yeah. I could have done it by getting them to kick over someone, or I could have got them by switching, going front kick, roundhouse, whatever. Okay. Why did you do it? Okay. So that's fine. What would have changed to make you use a different method? Well, for example, if I had people who were quite supple, I might have gone front round. Okay, fine. And when will you know if you've done it right? Well, I'll come back to this in a couple of weeks and we'll just see how many people have got a good action. So the idea of just reviewing your coaching against the required generation of alternatives, yeah, rather than this is the way I got taught, so this is the way I'll teach you. Yeah, which is again a very martial artsy thing, isn't it? My sensei says so. You're going to get it. And that's an example of It Depends coaching. It's looking at the situation, looking at the context, and going, I wonder what the best way for me to do this is.
Yeah, and I'm the coordinator of the Dutch Karate Federation Teachers Program, and even these days where there is the younger generation, so the teachers I get, karate teachers, are in their 30s, 40s. It's not the old generation anymore, but even they find it very difficult to be, how do you say it, reflective, because they are educated in their different karate styles, and it has been done this way, that way. The master tells to do this, so it's for them. It seems to be very awkward to question themselves.
See, I have the most marvelous sensei, Frank Perry. And the first time I met him, you know, I was going, God, this fellow's he's one of the best natural coaches I've ever seen. And he hasn't, I mean, I don't think he's had any formal training as a teacher or coach. He's got a wealth of experience and a lifetime of doing it. But Frank will, you know, Frank will offer you a solution, but he'll offer you a why. He'll always go, so, you know, you're fighting this bloke. Now, if you set him up like this, if you set him up like that, then this will happen. So he'll go through, he'll give you the breakdown. Now, for me, understanding that internal structure as to now, why would I do that here? And why wouldn't I do it over there? That's brilliant. Yeah. That's fundamental to my capacity to expand myself, to expand my horizons as a martial artist, albeit a very poorly talented one. But Frank's ability to be able to go, well, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. Let's try this. This is why. Yeah, it's great. So I think the best teachers, the best instructors will go, it's like this. I mean, you know, why do you punch from the hip? Or do you punch from here? Where do you punch from?
When we go back to karate, I think a little bit higher, maybe in between. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So that's fine. And there's good respect for me with bad shoulders. There's good reason. Yeah. But you know, for Shotokan, it comes here, right up here. Yeah. But you know, for other styles, it's right up here. Yeah. For other styles, it's a punch like that. Yeah. So there's all these different, you know. So what are the advantages and disadvantages? And of course, there are advantages and disadvantages because someone somewhere, you know, in the old days, some martial artist has gone, you know what, that works better. I'll do that. Yeah. You know, we're all experimental to a degree. Yeah. That's fine. You just encourage experimentation. And of course, Eric might punch from a different place to Dave because he's built different.
So for a teacher, it is important, if I understand you correctly, it's important to ask yourself questions why you're doing why you're doing what you're doing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. And also, you know, what might there be alternatives? You know, I mean, clearly the being water paper. You know, deified Bruce Lee, and he's a fantastic martial artist. You know, I go back to Musashi. We've been reading Gojin, the book of Five Rings, you know, for years, and that's why the quote that we used as a response was, "It's hard to know the universe when you only study one planet." And the classic way of the way of the learning was to go from school to school to school and fight people and pick up ideas. Generally, you killed them or they killed you, which is a little bit terminal, but that was the idea. You looked at different ways. Yeah. Now, for me, as a scientist, as a coach, you know, as anything, that's what you do. Yeah. You know, I'm a tech diver now. I love sort of like 100-meter type stuff. Yeah. And I will, you know, I'm not very experienced. I've got some experience, but I'll look to other people. Well, why do you do it that way? I'm a great why. You know, why is that? Well, because I do it. No, okay. Oh, because this bloke said do it like that. Yeah. And then you consider the trade-offs. You know?
And this whole it depends coaching, is this also applying to, because we in the Netherlands, we had, I think some 10 years ago, maybe, there was implicit learning and explicit learning went out of the window. And I have to admit, I was guilty on it also, because I wrote a lot of articles about it and being a little bit evangelistic and so on. But later on, I thought, well, there has to be some place for explicit learning also, because it has.
Otherwise, how do they learn?
Yeah. Yeah. So, is it the same?
You see, that's another. I mean, implicit learning, like Constraint sled, it's very sticky. It's a very attractive idea. Yeah. But I've yet to see any applied studies that show it works. Indeed, I think the only study that I've seen masters and colleagues do to test implicit learning actually made them worse. And yet, the basic idea of it, that if you have this tendency to think through things too much, what they call reinvestment, and think through things, that will screw you up. I'm right with that. Yeah. I'm completely in agreement with that. Of course, it's very clear, you know, paralysis by analysis. But what their solution is, so we won't give you any information, and then you can't analyze. And I'm going, I've never met anybody who was into anything football fans, darts players, karateka, whatever, who didn't think about what she or he did. So they generate their own explicit knowledge and they apply it on. So rather than don't give them any explicit knowledge, yeah, which, as I say, has been shown not to work well, have a look at, what they're doing with explicit knowledge and when they should and shouldn't reinvest. Again, we do a lot of response papers, not because we're argumentative beggars, but because we're just sort of going, hang on a minute, consider this. And one of my colleagues, or two of my colleagues, Ray Bobranaki and Howie Carlson, we've done a lot of stuff questioning the studies that have been done to test implicit learning. And very often, the implicit learning condition has, 3 or 4 instructions. The explicit learning condition has a ludicrous number of instructions. And you're comparing apples and oranges. You're comparing a technique where you gave someone 2 things to think about with someone where you give them 20 things to think about. Well, of course, this is going to be better than this. Duh. Bloody obvious. So, but I mean, I'm not suggesting anybody has deliberately cooked the books, but you've certainly done an unfair test. So I'm not a great fan of implicit learning because I think what happens is that inevitably humans generate rules and humans try to understand what they're doing, and that understanding is pretty useful because if they understand it, they can transfer it.
Yeah. I would like to end. I heard a beautiful, you talk with Brian Willis from the Excellence Training Academy. And in that interview, you talked about the importance about that as an operator or as a teacher, the most important thing is when the course is over, how to stay learning, or something like that.
If I give you, you turn up for my, okay, this is where it can get too explicit. So you turn up to my dojo, you turn up for a session. Eric, you do this, you do this, you do this. No, you do this, you do this, you do this. Yeah? Then Eric will go away and he can do this and this and this. But if I teach you and go, hey, look, you could do this, or you could do this, you could do this. Now, in this circumstance, you should do this. Da, 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 da. In other words, I give you somewhat more what we call conditional knowledge. Okay? I give you more of the why and why nots. Mm-hmm. It takes longer because there's more to teach, which means your progression within the session is less. However, when you leave the session, you're now equipped to look at other people and go, oh, he's doing that. Dave said, oh, yeah, no, and he's doing another way. Oh, you keep learning because you've got a structure. You've got a scaffolding, if you will, to be able to look at stuff and go, oh, I like that. Yeah. Oh, no, I'll try that. Yeah. So you will shoot this way. But you could shoot this way, you could shoot this way, you could Try, see what you think. Have a go. Yeah. And then come up with a solution for you. There's a template. Yeah. There's a naughty end and a safe end, and the naughty end's got to point towards the baddie, and the baddie, et cetera, et cetera. But after that, there are all sorts of variables. Have a play.
So what can we do best as teachers? What can we do best as teachers of teachers? What for advice can we give them to teach their students? Okay.
Advice is difficult because it depends. but it is because it depends on the context. So, for example, in general, I would suggest that you might, especially with once they get out of the novice stage, once they get, I don't know, greenish, they're on the way, then you might coach them by going, here's a challenge, here's an opponent like this. Now, what could you do? And you might question them, or you might give them alternatives. And then you might go, so what are the strengths and weaknesses of those alternatives? Yeah. And so you're building explicit knowledge, you're building an understanding, you're building okay, it depends. So I might do this, I might do that. And then they can go away and they can experiment and they can watch and they can try it out. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Because
So
let's face it, when if I'm working with a world class, I've got to go away to Luxembourg on Sunday to work with a very promising young karateka, and I can't give him all the answers because I can't be on the mat with him. I can't be shouting left foot, you know, it doesn't work. So I've got to develop his ability to read an opponent. Now I'm sure he has a very good sensei, and that will do that. My job is just to facilitate that process. Yeah. But that's how it works. So you get to a situation where you're generating alternatives for people and showing them how they might work, encouraging them to have a go. Because very often, especially when we get into more technical sports like, I don't know, free skiing or snowboarding, gymnastics, they're doing tricks you've never done. That's the whole point of that things move on. Yeah. So you want to equip them to come up with their new answers, you know?
Great, Dave. Yeah, I would love to talk. You have to go. I would love to talk about resilience also, because not now, but later on, maybe another time, because you wrote that great title, The Rocky Road to the Top. I'm not sure. It's maybe 15 years old or something.
Yeah, and we continue to do that, Eric. And frankly, we get more and more work. I mean, people didn't like that paper because it had huge trauma, and they didn't like the T word. And they haven't bothered to read the paper because what we say is it's traumatic. So if we're currently, and we continue to do this work, that basically you benefit as a performer, even as a coach, from quite upsetting negative experiences that you can overcome. Anyway, as you say, you'll have to ask me back now. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, before I let you go, what are some necessary books to read? It depends, of course, but
you see, when you read a book, you read knowledge that's 2 years out of date.
Yeah,
because it's taken that long to get it out. However, as a coach, you really haven't got time to be able to look at all the you haven't got time to look at all the papers that come out. I think that this mode of learning for a busy coach is quite a good mode. And my concern is when people do it who aren't asking on people who know enough. So in other words, when it's what I really want people to do is to listen critically, and then when they listen to me say something, go, well, that's not right, because and then there's this consideration, this critical consideration. So I would encourage people to, yes, you can read widely. I'd encourage people to read stuff that you don't agree with. Yeah, because otherwise you end up with an echo chamber. So you should read stuff that questions stuff that you agree with. So if I'm passionate about EcoD, I read stuff that criticizes it. If I'm passionate about cognitive, I read EcoD. That's what you do. Certainly what I do. But you also then think carefully and quiz yourself as to what the mechanism is, how that's working. Okay.
Great, Dave. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.
And yourself, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
It's an honor. It's great. Thank you so much.